High above Maggie Valley, North Carolina, hidden at the top of Buck Mountain, sits an abandoned Wild West town where gunfights once erupted every hour. Families rode a chairlift more than 1,000 feet up the mountainside, and a roller coaster twisted dangerously close to the edge. It was called Ghost Town in the Sky, and at its peak, hundreds of thousands of people visited every year. But then came malfunctioning rides, stranded passengers, financial disasters, a massive landslide, and one failed reopening after another. Eventually, the pretend ghost town became a very real one. Today, its empty saloons and abandoned streets are still sitting on the mountaintop, and some believe this amusement park wasn't merely unlucky, they believe it was cursed. Welcome back, my spooky travelers. This is Death Kiss Traveler, the only podcast that dives deep into the dark history, horror, and hauntings at your favorite places. The circus, your county fair, or today, a theme park. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host. And before we make that climb, make sure you are following Death Kiss Traveler on Instagram or TikTok for photographs, videos, and even more dark history connected to this episode and others. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if you are loving this podcast, please leave me a 5-star review wherever you are listening. It really helps my episodes grow. July is going to be my biggest month I have ever had. And thank you to my listeners. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate it. I can't believe that in a year, my podcast has grown so much. Now, let's travel back to 1961 and enter Ghost Town in the Sky. Before Ghost Town in the Sky becomes an actual ghost town, before the abandoned saloons and rusted rides, failed reopenings, bankruptcies, and landslides, it was simply a wildly ambitious idea. Take the American Wild West, move it approximately 2,000 miles east, rebuild it on top of a mountain in North Carolina, and then make families dangle from a chairlift to get there. Because apparently regular ground level cowboys weren't exciting enough. We have to take you up in the sky. Our story begins in Maggie Valley, a narrow mountain community tucked between Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains of western North Carolina. The town itself originally had simply been just Maggie, named after Maggie May Setzer, the 14-year-old daughter of local resident Jack Setzer. In 1904, Jack grew tired of traveling several miles to collect his mail and petitioned the federal government for permission to open up a post office. He submitted the names of 3 of his daughters as possible names for the new postal station, which was Cora, Meddy, and Maggie. Cora and Meddy were rejected because their names were considered too similar to other communities, but Maggie was accepted. When 14-year-old Maggie learned that the settlement would carry her name, she reportedly burst into tears, which is honestly the correct teenage response to finding out that your father has named an entire town after you without asking. For decades, Maggie remained a tiny, relatively isolated Appalachian community consisting mostly of farms, mountain families, and one long road running through the valley. But that began changing after the creation of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 1934 and the construction of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Suddenly, tourists were driving through western North Carolina in search of mountain views, roadside attractions, and a place to spend the night. So small motels, restaurants, and gift shops began appearing along U.S. Route 19, also known locally as Soco Road. Still, when a woman named Alaska Presley arrived in Maggie Valley in 1955, she later remembered it as a little old nothing. And yes, her name really was Alaska Presley, which already sounds like someone destined to either own an amusement park or a rhinestone-covered dinner theater, right? Alaska and her husband Hubert Presley became heavily involved in Maggie Valley's growing tourism industry. Their family-owned hotels helped establish multiple businesses throughout the valley. Then, sometime near the end of the 1950s, a Virginia businessman named Ronald Braxton Coburn, usually called RB, walked into their lives with a very strange proposal. Coburn had traveled through the American West and visited several old mining settlements and abandoned frontier towns. He had become fascinated by the places left behind after mining booms ended: empty saloons, weathered storefronts, dusty streets, and entire communities that essentially just vanished. Western movies and television shows, they were also exploding in popularity. Programs like Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Wagon Trail, and Laramie had convinced an entire generation of children that their career options were either a cowboy, a sheriff, outlaw, or the unfortunate person who gets shot before the first commercial break. Coburn believed families would pay it to step inside a living version of that world. His original plan was to construct the attraction in Ratcliffe Cove. Closer to Waynesville, he had reportedly already made a down payment on property there when someone suggested that he speak with Alaska and Hubert Presley. According to Alaska, RB arrived at the Presley's hotel and explained his idea. Hubert then took him to meet a relative known as Uncle Dan Carpenter, who owned property on Buck Mountain above Maggie Valley. And this is where history begins mixing with local folklore. One story says that Uncle Dan had once lost several sheep somewhere up on the mountain. While searching for them, he supposedly heard their cries coming from inside a large cavern. When he later tried to locate the entrance again, it had disappeared, as though the mountain had closed it over. Coburn was intrigued. He reportedly imagined adding cavern tours to his planned Western attraction. The cave was never located, but Coburn had found something even more valuable: a mountaintop. Most reasonable people would look at an isolated, steep, and largely undeveloped mountain and think that would be a difficult place to build 40 buildings, several restaurants, and an amusement park. R.B. Coburn looked at it and thought, perfect. The Presleys helped connect Coburn with the property and local investors. Beginning around 1959, much of the project's early financing reportedly came from area residents purchasing investment bonds. The idea simply wasn't to create another roadside attraction. Coburn wanted visitors to feel as though they had physically left modern North Carolina and entered a 19th century frontier settlement. To create it, he brought in designer Russell Pearson. Pearson was part architect, part entertainer, and part professional creator of places where adults willingly handed over money to pretend they lived in another century. Before Ghost Town, he had helped design Frontier City in Oklahoma and Silver Dollar City in Missouri, two of America's earliest heavily themed amusement attractions. Pearson and Coburn reportedly traveled through actual Western towns, making drawings of old buildings and collecting furniture, props, and architectural details. The finished park wouldn't be constructed entirely from imagination. Its buildings were designed to resemble real frontier structures: crooked roof lines, wooden boardwalks, swinging saloon doors, and all. The result was a town that looked aged before it had technically been born. But first, they needed to create a flat piece to put it on. Construction began in September of 1960. More than 200 local workers were hired, and crews began removing enormous quantities of rock and soil from the summit of Buck Mountain. Contemporary park historians claimed that as much as 70 feet was cut from portions of the mountain. Thousands of yards of earth were shifted to form several separate levels where the park's different towns would eventually stand. This was not a small collection of decorative storefronts. Crews constructed approximately 40 replica buildings containing around 120,000 square feet of space. The project consumed an estimated 300,000 feet of lumber, 200,000 feet of plywood, and 200,000 pounds of nails. The total cost in 1960 was approximately $1 million, more than $10 million today, and all of it was being built around 4,600 feet above sea level. Ghost Town would later advertise itself as North Carolina's mile-high theme park, which was wonderful marketing, as long as nobody arrived with a calculator and pointed out that a mile is 5,280 feet. But North Carolina's approximately 87% of a mile theme park doesn't fit nicely on a billboard. The park was divided into several themed areas placed at different elevations. The central attraction was the Old West Town itself, a complete frontier street containing a bank, jail, schoolhouse, church, general store, and 2 saloons. The Silver Dollar Saloon featured can-can dancers in elaborate stage shows. The Red Dog Saloon offered country and bluegrass music throughout the day. There was also a mining town where visitors could pan for gold and silver, a mountain town based on the Appalachian life, an area called Indian Village. The Indian Village presented highly theatrical versions of indigenous life. Remember, it's 1961, so this included staged hunts and raids. The performances were filtered heavily through Western movie stereotypes of 1961, and they were much closer to Hollywood's version of Native history than the actual history of the Cherokee people who had lived in that region for centuries. But the park's central attraction wasn't a ride. It was murder. Every hour on the hour, armed outlaws appeared on the main street. The bank would be robbed. The sheriff would intervene. Gunfire would erupt between the buildings. Men would tumble from balconies, collapse onto the dusty road, and occasionally fall from rooftops. Then after the audience moved along, everyone got back up and prepared to die again. As one man who grew up working in the park later joked, Ghost Town was a strange place to spend a childhood because people were shot and killed every hour. These performances were loud, physical, and surprisingly dangerous. Actors used blank-firing firearms and performed their own falls, fights, and rooftop stunts, often several times each day. One of the most famous gunfighters was Robert Bradley. Bradley originally worked at the bottom of the mountain parking cars, but he repeatedly bothered the gunfighters because he wanted to join the show. Eventually, they allowed him to appear briefly on the roof of the Silver Dollar Saloon. His entire job was to come outside, get shot, and disappear back through the door. Later that same day, Bradley performed in a jailbreak scene. When the other gunfighters opened fire, he threw himself into a dramatic fall that sent gravel flying through the street. Coburn was reportedly so impressed that he declared Bradley would not be returning to the parking lot. Bradley eventually became known for portraying the Apache Kid and performed a death fall from the roof of the general store 3 times a day. According to park lore, actors Burt Reynolds and Tony Dow both described Bradley as one of the best stunt fallers they had ever seen. But not every stunt went according to plan. Performer Herbert Coward, known as Cowboy, was participating in one of the gunfights when another performer accidentally struck him in the mouth with a .45 caliber pistol. The blow knocked out Coward's front teeth, but instead of stopping the performance, as most people probably would, they kept going. They finished the fight, and the audience apparently assumed it was just a part of the show. Coward would later become famous for playing the terrifying toothless man in the movie Deliverance. So technically, Ghost Town didn't just give him a start in acting, it also gave him the teeth or lack of teeth for his most famous role. Another long-running show was created because Coward once arrived at work without his cowboy costume. Desperate for something to wear, he removed the clothing from a dummy that had been hanging near the marshal's office for approximately 2 years. Unfortunately, the clothes had acquired actual bugs. Coward turned the problem into a character called Old Zeke, a drunken mountain man who stumbled through the streets, scratching himself and picking insects from his clothes. The routine became so popular that it remained part of the park's entertainment for years. Nothing says a wholesome family vacation like an armed alcoholic covered in fleas. Yet before visitors could see any of this, Ghost Town had to solve its largest problem. How do you transport thousands of tourists to an amusement park sitting more than 1,000 vertical feet above its parking lot? During the park's earliest operation in 1961, neither the incline railway nor the chairlift was ready. Visitors were transported up Buck Mountain in buses, and it was a steep, narrow dirt road with severe switchbacks. At 2 of those turns, the buses reportedly couldn't make the corner in one motion. Drivers had to stop, back toward the unprotected mountain edge, and then reposition the bus before going upward. So the first attraction at Ghost Town was apparently realizing that your bus driver might be the last person you ever saw. A more permanent solution required one of the wildest construction projects in the park's history. To carve a route for the double incline railway, workers attached a 25-ton bulldozer to a 2-inch thick steel cable. A second bulldozer and winch system positioned pulled it up the machine and down the mountainside. At certain points, the suspended bulldozer was reportedly swung across the slope like a gigantic mechanical pendulum to clear the path. Nobody involved appears to have asked whether there was a less terrifying way to do this. The completed vehicle traveled more than 3,300 feet up the mountainside and carried 48 passengers at a time. The track's grade varied from roughly 30% to an astonishing 77%. A 77% grade is not transportation. That is a wall with seating. In 1962, the park opened a second route, a 2-seat chairlift running almost parallel to the incline railway. Its cable stretched approximately 3,370 feet up Buck Mountain and carried riders at about 310 feet per minute. At the time, it was promoted as the longest chairlift in North Carolina and the second longest in the United States. It could reportedly transport as many as 1,200 people an hour. The chairlift also had no enclosed cabins. Guests simply sat on a narrow bench with their feet hanging above the trees while the valley grew smaller and smaller beneath them. There's no hiding the destination. As the chairs climbed, the western town slowly appeared along the ridge, and when visitors stepped off, the illusion was complete. The smell of wood smoke and food drifted through the street. Can-can dancers performed inside the saloon, bluegrass music played nearby, outlaws prowled the boardwalks, a body might be hanging outside the marshal's office. Then gunfire would explode in the buildings, and someone came crashing off a roof. Ghost Town had opened exactly at the right moment. Some fun history about this park is that by the 1960s, America was obsessed with Westerns, and the park began inviting television personalities to appear alongside its homegrown gunfighters. Burt Reynolds participated in the show while he was appearing on Gunsmoke. According to longtime performer Robert Bradley, Reynolds initially came for a short celebrity engagement and remained for much of the summer, often playing a bank robber. He loved it so much. During one of the stunts, Reynolds would burst from the bank and run down the street while Bradley jumped over a railing and tackled him at full speed. Bradley later described the result as the two of them going ass over elbows through the street. Dan Blocker, better known as Hoss Cartwright from Bonanza, visited in 1963. His appearance produced one of Ghost Town's largest single-day crowds, approximately 16,000 people. Traffic backed up from Maggie Valley toward Clyde, filling the narrow 2-lane highway for miles. The crowds just kept coming. By the early 1970s, Ghost Town was attracting more than 400,000 visitors a season. The little mountain community below suddenly had more tourists than it could comfortably feed, house, or move. Motels multiplied along Soco Road. Restaurants opened to serve the families arriving for Ghost Town. Gift shops and roadside attractions appeared. Businesses became so intense that Alaska Presley later remembered making visitors angry simply because there weren't enough available seats to carry everyone up the mountain. Ghost Town didn't just become Maggie Valley's biggest attraction, it helped turn Maggie Valley into a tourism town. For families throughout the Southeast, the park became a tradition. Children who visited in the 1960s returned with their own children in the 70s and 80s. They remembered the long chairlift, the saloon dancers, the smell of wooden buildings, and the sudden crack of gunfire echoing across the mountaintop. At that point, Ghost Town seemed unstoppable. The town was packed. The chairlift kept climbing. The outlaws kept robbing the same bank. Robert Bradley kept falling from the same roof. And every hour, the dead men stood back up. But beneath the gunfights, the music, the frontier fantasy, Ghost Town carried a weakness that had been there from its first day. Everything depended on the mountain. Guests had to be carried up it. Every beam, ride component, water pipe, and replacement part had to be hauled onto the mountain. Every building had to survive the weather at 4,600 feet. And every dollar the park made depended on keeping that complicated aging wood functioning high above the valley. For its first years, Ghost Town's biggest attractions were the live shows and the remarkably committed population of fake criminals. But amusement parks, they have a problem. No matter how entertaining the gunfights are, eventually somebody asks, okay, but where's the roller coasters? So Ghost Town began adding rides. Not all at once, and not according to one perfectly organized master plan either. Attractions appeared, disappeared, changed names, received new paint, jobs, and occasionally became so poorly documented that even amusement park historians are still trying to figure out exactly who, what, and where they are. But together they transformed Ghost Town from a Western attraction with a few amusements into something much stranger. A mountaintop carnival where even the most ordinary ride felt slightly dangerous. Not necessarily because the ride itself was extreme, but because there was a mountain underneath it. So let's talk about some of the classic rides. Ghost Town collected many of its standard rides found at regional amusement parks and traveling carnivals. There was a tilt-a-whirl. There were bumper cars, a merry-go-round, and a collection of children's attractions. There was also a park train that carried visitors past different portions of the property. The train was one of the calmer attractions, giving families an opportunity to sit down, look around, and briefly recover from the discovery that their lunch did not enjoy the tilt-a-whirl. But the park's most memorable rides were those that took familiar carnival machinery and added darkness, height, disorientation, or a vaguely threatening Western name. One of the park's most fondly remembered rides was the Black Widow. Mechanically, the Black Widow was a scrambler. Several groups of passenger cars were attached to rotating arms and they spun. Traditionally, a scrambler, it's already disorienting. Ghost Town decided to make its version more unsettling by placing it inside a darkened building. Oh, that would make me so sick. Former visitors remember the Black Widow operating in total darkness with flashing or strobe lights, briefly illuminating the riders. One moment there's nothing, then came a flash of light revealing another car filled with screaming people. Then darkness again. Then another flash revealing your mother realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. Then darkness. The darkness made it difficult to anticipate the ride's movements. Riders couldn't clearly see which direction they were traveling, where the other cars were, or when the spinning would stop. It was part amusement ride, part haunted attraction, and part voluntary integration. Years later, the Scrambler was moved outside, repainted, and renamed The Undertaker. The new name fit the Western theme, but it was dark, and I love it. And now we're moving on to the Dreamcatcher. It was a paratrooper-style ride. Its passenger cars were arranged around the edge of a large wheel. As the wheel rotated, it gradually lifted into an angled position, carrying riders through a continuous series of rising and falling movements. At full speed, the cars swung outward while traveling around the tilted wheel. The Dreamcatcher wasn't the most extreme ride ever built, but it exposed cars and elevated location made it feel considerably more dramatic. The name Dreamcatcher sounds peaceful. The actual experience was more like being spun diagonally through the air while trying not to throw up a corn dog. The Roundup was essentially a large circular cage. The ride began rotating faster and faster until the centrifugal force held everyone in place. Now we know it as the Gravitron in most places. They also had a ride called the Casino, and the Casino was a Trabant-style ride manufactured by Chance Rides. Passengers sat on the outside of the large circular platform. The entire disc spun while rocking, rising, and tilting. And the seats are facing inward. Riders could watch everyone else progress through the same emotional journey. Confidence, concern, regret, and finally the quiet acceptance that the ride's operator was now in control of your destiny. The casino was added relatively late in the original park's history, reportedly opening around 2000. Then there's the Monster. The Monster combined several kinds of motion at once. Passenger cars were attached to arms extending from the central rotating structure. Depending on the model and its movements, riders could be lifted, lowered, and spun multiple directions. The Monster became one of the most recognizable rides in Ghost Town's later years, although detailed records of its arrival and early operation are surprisingly thin. And that becomes a recurring problem when researching the park. Ghost Town carefully preserved the illusion of the Old West. It was considerably less careful about preserving a complete spreadsheet of the rides and installation dates and all of the details. A couple of the other rides that they had were the Sea Dragon, which was a swinging pirate ship ride, which makes me laugh because a giant pirate ship is not particularly connected to an 1840s mountain settlement, but at some point the park's theme seemed to have become Old West and whatever else we can get up there. They had a ride called the Mountain Town Swings, and this attraction really took advantage of the scenery. The ride was later associated with the name Gunslinger. It operated like a traditional chair swing ride. They sat in individual seats and they spun outward, but the chairs actually swung open to mountain scenery. The ride didn't need an enormous drop or a complicated track. Its location created the illusion that the chairs were sailing directly beyond the edge. I don't know if I could ride that one. That one's a little sketchy for me. Because if you look down, there is a beautiful view beneath your feet, followed by the realization that there is a beautiful view beneath your feet, and that is thousands of feet below you. The ride is a perfect example of the Ghost Town's greatest trick. Then there's the Silver Bullet. The Silver Bullet is easily one of the strangest chapters in the park's ride history because the surviving descriptions don't completely agree about what it was or how successful it even operated. In 1984, Ghost Town promoted plans for a new major attraction sponsored by Coors Beer. The reported price was approximately $1 million. The name Silver Bullet was a reference to the silver packaging used by the beer. So yes, a family attraction was named through a partnership with a beer company. The 1980s were a magical time, weren't they? Contemporary advertisements describe the Silver Bullet as a monorail coaster. It was supposed to carry riders approximately 900 feet down the face of the mountain, traveling through wooden terrain, beneath the existing chairlift, and close to a pond. Promotional material promised cars riding only about 18 inches above the ground. The ride would bank at angles approaching 45 degrees, produce approximately 1.3 Gs, and reach speeds of 50 miles an hour. The advertising claimed riders would race between trees, strike or skim through water, and feel as if they were shooting off the face of the mountain. It kind of sounds like an alpine slide, a monorail, and a log flume ride had been left together after closing time. But historians disagree about exactly what it was that was completed. Some descriptions call the Silver Bullet a monorail coaster. Others refer to it as a log flume. Whatever it was, some later accounts claimed the original concept encountered major trouble. During testing, And guess what? It never entered regular public operation as advertised. The available evidence confirms that Ghost Town prepared the mountainside for the attraction and promoted it heavily. What remains unclear is how much of the promised ride guests actually experienced. The roller coaster database, which, yes, there is a roller coaster database, notes that researchers are still attempting to determine exactly what the Silver Bullet was. It was promoted as the ride that would bring new excitement to the ghost town. Instead, it's just a mystery. A $1 million attraction surrounded by confident advertising, incomplete records, and stories that grew stranger every time they were repeated. And it would not be the ghost town's last attempt to build something enormous into the mountain. There was the Red Devil. By the late 1980s, Ghost Town needed a signature thrill ride. The park needed something large enough to appear in television commercials and dramatic enough to compete with newer attractions throughout the region. The answer arrived in the form of a custom steel roller coaster designed by O.D. Hopkins. Its name was the Red Devil. Construction began in April of 1988. Building a roller coaster under normal conditions is difficult. Building it on the side of the mountain with rain, fog, uneven terrain, well, yeah, that can completely complicate every stage of construction. It's a different category of problems. Work fell behind schedule, and the coaster missed its planned summer opening. The Red Devil finally opened in September of 1988. It was worth the wait. The coaster had approximately 2,037 feet of track, a height difference of about 90 feet, one vertical loop, and a top speed commonly listed at 50 miles an hour. How fast or what the Red Devil didn't make it special. Its layout did. Traditional roller coasters begin with a lift hill. Riders leave the station and are slowly pulled upward by a chain. The Red Devil didn't need that to begin that way. Its loading station was already positioned near the highest portion of the track. The mountain was the lift hill. Once released from the station, the train rolled around the sharp curve and headed almost immediately toward the main drop. Within seconds, riders plunged into the coaster's vertical loop. There was no long clicking climb, which passengers could reconsider being on the ride. The Red Devil gave them roughly 7 seconds before that drop, and then it turned upside down. After the loop, the track followed the terrain along the mountainside. Trees surrounded the portions of the course, while other sections opened toward distant ridgelines. From the train, it could appear as if the coaster were racing away from solid ground. The track was properly supported beneath the cars, but that wasn't necessarily what terrified the passengers. The passengers, well, they saw a red roller coaster train charging toward the side of a mountain. Fog, well, it made the experience even more unusual. On cloudy days, section of the track would disappear into the mist. The train seemed to plunge into nothing before reappearing farther along the course. I would love that. The Red Devil wasn't the tallest or the fastest in the country. It didn't need to be. Its setting created an experience that couldn't easily be duplicated. Ghost Town had finally found the way to turn the mountain itself into a roller coaster element. One of the park's final additions was the House of Terror, a seasonal haunted attraction introduced in 2009. It wasn't a mechanical ride, but it fit naturally into the increasingly spooky identity surrounding Ghost Town. Guests entered expecting artificial darkness, manufactured scares, and performers pretending something terrible has happened inside. Outside, the park itself was struggling through a reality much more frightening than anything created for Halloween. Its rides had become increasingly difficult and expensive to maintain. Machines designed decades earlier needed specialized repair. Some attractions operated sporadically, others remained closed, and Ghost Town's most famous roller coaster was about to reveal a very serious problem. For years, Ghost Town had used height, darkness, and scenery to create the illusion of danger. But the accidents, malfunctions, and structural failures were not just illusions. and that's where our story goes next. So I know that was a long description of just some of the rides, but we needed to talk about some of those, and honestly, I find them absolutely fascinating what old parks used to have. And it moves on to our next section because Ghost Town in the Sky has now developed a reputation as a deadly, possibly cursed amusement park. Online videos claim people were killed on its roller coasters. Social media posts insist multiple visitors died. Some even claim people fell from the chairlift or drowned on the mysterious silver bullet. But there is a problem. The documented history does not support these stories. I couldn't find any credible source confirming that a visitor was killed on a ride at Ghost Town in the Sky. That doesn't mean the park had a spotless safety record. Not even close. The real story isn't one enormous fatal disaster. It's a long chain of warnings, financial breakdowns, desperation, and increasingly ominous signs that the park was losing its battle against the age of gravity and its own location. The first accident story we need to address involves the silver bullet. Numerous claims have repeated the same account that a silver bullet car derailed during testing, destroying the vehicle before the attraction ever officially opened. Another version claimed that the silver bullet later operated as a different ride and injured several passengers during a malfunction in 2009. The problem is that the silver bullet's entire history is poorly documented. Sources don't agree on whether it was the monorail, the log flume, or something else. They can't even agree on how much of it was completed or whether the later ride using that name was even the same machine. And I couldn't find a reliable news report or official accident record with any accident. That doesn't prove nothing happened. It means that we shouldn't present the story as an established fact. I really am trying to get my podcast to have all of the facts, because there are a lot of rumors out there. It may be true, it may be partially true, or several different attractions and incidents may have blended together, and over a decade of retelling, it just, becomes worse and worse. Ghost Town has enough documented problems. A roller coaster derailment isn't really one of them. By the late 1990s and the early 2000s, visitors were increasingly complaining that many of Ghost Town's rides weren't operating. Attractions would be listed as a part of the park, but remain closed when guests arrived. Mechanical breakdowns, they became common, and the cost of maintaining aging equipment continued to rise. Replacing an amusement ride, it's expensive. Replacing one in a location where every tool, mechanic, and custom component has to be transported up a mountain, it's a special kind of financial punishment. The park was also competing against increasingly elaborate destinations in Tennessee and throughout the Southeast. Families could visit newer parks with enormous roller coasters, water rides, and recognizable characters. Six Flags, anyone? Or they could visit Ghost Town and discover that half the rides were taking an unscheduled personal day. The ride's failures weren't simply disappointing guests, they were damaging the park's reputation. People began telling other families not to make the trip because there was no guarantee the major attractions would be operating. And once that starts happening, an amusement park can enter a deadly cycle. Attendance fails, revenue falls, maintenance is delayed, more rides close, attendance falls again, and Ghost Town was caught in that cycle. Then came July of 2002. Most of the summaries of Ghost Town's history mention one chairlift failure in 2002. But what I found is that there was actually two separate incidents that July. During the first, 42 people were stranded on the chairlift. Some reportedly remained suspended for as long as 4 hours while crews worked to evacuate the system. Imagine sitting in an exposed chair, unable to move, with no clear idea when you're getting down. It's actually happened to me on a ski lift several times, and it is terrifying. I think the longest I've ever been stranded is about 10 to 15 minutes, enough to make my anxiety spike. So no emergency exit. There's nobody telling you what's going on. You're just stuck. You're simply sitting in the air until someone with a ladder or a rope or a repair manual solves the problem. So later that same month, the same chairlift stopped again. This time, 26 people were stranded, and some of them waited nearly 2.5 hours to be rescued. 5 people were reportedly treated and released for minor injuries. State labor officials were expected to inspect the chairlift after the incident. No one was killed, the chairs did not fall from the cable, but the second failure was devastating because the chairlift wasn't merely another attraction. When this system stopped, Ghost Town's ability to safely move a large number of people up the hill was suddenly put into question. It's not like closing the tilt-a-whirl. This is how people got to the park. That breakdown became the symbolic end to the original Ghost Town. Within days, R.B. Coburn closed the park and placed it up for sale. For the next several years, the property sat largely unused. The buildings aged, the rides remained exposed to the mountain weather, and every season the park remained closed made reopening it more difficult and more expensive. Ghost Town had finally become something it had spent decades pretending to be, an empty town. New owners eventually purchased the property and reopened Ghost Town in May of 2007. The announcement generated enormous excitement. People remembered the park from childhood. Local businesses hoped the crowds would return. Former visitors wanted to walk through those streets again and introduce the place to their children. But reopening an amusement park is not the same as turning the lights back on at an old restaurant. The rides, they had been sitting unused for years. Safety requirements had changed. Electrical systems, mechanical equipment, water lines, retaining walls, and emergency procedures, well, they all needed attention. The park did reopen, but several major attractions were unavailable. The Cliffhanger roller coaster failed to receive approval in time. Other rides faced repairs, delays, or state inspections. Ghost Town was alive again, but it's on life support at this point. In June 2008, a power failure disabled the chairlift again. 39 people were stranded for about 90 minutes. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the incident revived memories of 2002. Ghost Town had spent years convincing the public that it was safe to return, but then the same machines stopped working and stopped carrying people. To be fair, equipment can lose power without being dangerous or defective. Chairlifts at ski resorts and attractions, well, they occasionally stop, or they stop all the time, and emergency plans exist for precisely that reason. But public perception doesn't care about a failed power outage. Visitors remember that people were trapped in those chairs. And then they remember the closure, and now they're watching another rescue. Ghost Town was trying to escape its past, while its past kept getting stuck in the trees. The Reborn's Park greatest mechanical nightmare was the Cliffhanger. It was renamed the Red Devil, and the original track remained, but a new train was manufactured to operate on it. That combination immediately created problems. The new train had to work with track that was constructed 2 decades earlier. State inspectors raised concerns involving the passenger harnesses, the way the cars moved, and whether the entire system was actually safe. During testing, the train repeatedly became stuck at certain points on the course. The manufacturer struggled to determine why. Eventually, investigators discovered that the new train's neoprene wheels were slightly too soft. The additional friction slowed the train enough that it couldn't always complete its course. Harder wheels helped solve that problem. Then there was cooking oil. At one point, the track had been lubricated using cooking oil. This sounds like the beginning of a Southern recipe, not a roller coaster maintenance log, but this story, it's on its own. It gets so much worse. The oil might have reduced friction, but during required test runs, the seats were filled with 170-pound sandbags to simulate passengers. Sand leaking from the bags stuck to the oily track and worked its way onto the train's bearings. Instead of smoothly reducing friction, the mixture created a gritty coating. State officials ordered the buildup removed, and the manufacturer reportedly recommended applying baby oil directly to the wheels instead. So, for a brief moment in amusement park history, Ghost Town's signature roller coaster was being maintained with products that could be purchased in the personal care aisle of Walmart. But the strange maintenance problems were only the beginning part of testing. Before the roller coaster could be certified, it was required to complete 1,000 loaded test runs. Eventually, the ride passed. On July 1st, 2009, after years of delays, Cliffhanger finally opened up to the public. It operated for 1 day. The following morning, an experienced ride operator noticed abnormal movement in a seat near the back of the train. It was subtle, something an ordinary passenger or even an employee really wouldn't notice. But that operator had learned the sound and the movement of the new train during its testing, and he knew something wasn't right. Thank goodness. A state inspector was still at the park and examined the seat. The inspection required crawling beneath it with a flashlight and mirror. When the seat was disassembled, officials discovered a hairline crack in its metal frame near the bolt connecting it to the car. That is terrifying. The coaster was immediately shut down. Luckily, no one was injured, but from a business standpoint, the timing was catastrophic. Ghost Town had spent years promoting the return of his most famous ride. It finally opened, and 1 day later, state inspectors closed it again. Management described the problem as part of the normal fine-tuning process. Technically, they had a point. Newly manufactured amusement equipment can develop unforeseen problems during testing and early operation. But visitors didn't hear responsible, preventable shutdowns. They heard the mountain roller coaster cracked. Cliffhanger briefly returned near the end of the 2009 season, but its problems had already consumed time, money, and public confidence that the park could not afford to lose. The new owners had reopened Ghost Town at almost the worst possible economic moment. We all know about that time and how hard it hit. Gas prices climbed. The Great Recession hit. Ghost Town relied heavily on families willing to drive into the mountains and spend money on tickets, food, and souvenirs. Those were exactly the kinds of expenses that people had been cutting. By March, the company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Filings listed approximately $2.5 million in unpaid bills. Court filings listed approximately $2.5 million in unpaid bills owed to more than 200 businesses, around $9.5 million in mortgage debt. Dozens of the creditors were local companies. Construction firms, suppliers, and vendors had completed work and were waiting to be paid. The park also owed state and local taxes. The bankruptcy filings revealed another detail that did not improve public confidence. During a 2-week period in March, Ghost Town's chief executive and a company he controlled received nearly $25,000. During that same reporting period, the park's advanced ticket campaign brought in only $1,659. That's not a healthy ratio. Ghost Town needed emergency funding simply to open for the 2009 season. Management approached banks, economic development agencies, and local government entities. Traditional lenders, well, they're not interested, which that's never comforting. When a bank looks at your amusement park and says, that roller coaster is too frightening for us, things have become way serious. Ghost Town asked the town of Maggie Valley for a $200,000 loan. The request caused controversy. Supporters argued that the park created jobs and supported the surrounding tourism economy. Opponents questioned whether taxpayers should be responsible for rescuing a private business already buried in debt. Before town officials made a final decision, management announced that a private business owner had offered assistance. Ghost Town did reopen in May of 2000. Adult admission tickets had increased from $28 to $31. But several rides still hadn't been approved, including Cliffhanger. The park needed people to return. The people were waiting for the rides to work. The rides needed money, and the money required people to return. Ghost Town had created a financial loop even more difficult to escape than its roller coaster. During May, June, and July of 2009, the park reported approximately $1.53 million in revenue. Great. But its operating costs during that same period was approximately $1.85 million. It was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars while open. When the season ended, employees complained that they had not been paid for their final 2 weeks of work. The local sanitary district shut off water to the property because of unpaid bills. The fake saloons were still standing, the fake bank was still there, but the financial disaster, well, it was completely real. While management fought bankruptcy and failing equipment, another problem was developed beneath the park. Retaining walls were responsible for holding large amounts of earth in place around the developed portions of the property. By 2007, an old railroad tie retaining wall that was 40 feet high in places had completely deteriorated. Court documents later described sections blowing out and the structure being in danger of failure. Contractors rebuilt an approximately 80-foot section and constructed an additional wall running 380 feet. The new wall was around 25 feet tall in places and was intended to reinforce the older structure. The work reportedly cost around $377,000. But then in 2009, people associated with Ghost Town noticed new signs of distress on the wall. Another engineer inspected it, and according to later court filings, he determined the wall was not functioning as intended, and that structural failure was possible if it wasn't replaced. So additional work was performed, soil was removed to reduce the pressure behind the wall, and part of the wall was shortened. Then on the evening of February 5th, 2010, the mountain gave way. A massive debris flow tore down the slope near Ghost Town. Later reporting described the slide as approximately 175 feet wide and stretching for more than half a mile. Mud, trees, rock, and debris surged down the road. Some sections of the debris were reportedly 30 feet high and moving at approximately 30 miles an hour. Dozens of homes were evacuated, several were damaged. Somehow no one was killed. One woman named Tammy Jones was home alone when she heard a growing roar outside. The house began shaking, mud and debris struck the property, smashing into one side of the home and shifting it on its foundation. According to a later lawsuit, Jones had to push through mud, branches, and debris to escape. So scary. The slide destroyed the yard and damaged the home's septic system so severely that the property became unlivable. The debris buried portions of the road that went up to Ghost Town, and it created an enormous cleanup problem just as Ghost Town was fighting to survive bankruptcy. The cause of the slide became the subject of years of litigation. The affected homeowners argued that deterioration and improperly constructed retaining walls at Ghost Town were responsible. The engineers and the contractors blamed one another, disputed whether the walls had actually triggered the slide, and had argued that natural forces may have caused the mountain to fall. It became a geological version of the question, did the wall collapse and release the mountain, or did the moving mountain destroy the wall? What was not disputed was that the slope had shown signs of trouble. The wall had required major repair. Distress had been observed, and thousands of tons of mountainside came down with it. Ghost Town had spent decades fighting with gravity and steel cables and concrete, wooden supports, and retaining walls. Gravity had finally collected. Management continued insisting that Ghost Town would reopen for the 2010 season. Plans were announced, potential buyers appeared, creditors debated reorganization rather than liquidation. One proposed deal involved millions of dollars intended to prevent foreclosure and buy out existing investors. But that deal collapsed. Ghost Town never opened for the 2010 season. In August, BB&T foreclosed on the property, citing approximately $9.5 million in outstanding debt. The park remained closed in 2011. By that point, the downfall could no longer be blamed on one chairlift, one cracked coaster, one mudslide. The town had been defeated by a combination of everything: the aging rides, high maintenance cost, failing attendance, competition from larger parks, a disastrous economy, massive debt, unpaid employees and vendors and utilities, inspection delays, unstable ground, and an operating location that made every repair more difficult. There's not one single villain, unless you count the mountain. Strangely, one of Ghost Town's most seriously documented injuries happened after its main financial collapse. During a very limited reopening in July of 2013, the park brought back its staged gunfights. On July 6th, veteran performer Robert Bradley was still playing the Apache Kid. During the show, Bradley stood more than 25 feet from another performer, armed with a shotgun loaded with blanks. The shotgun fired. Bradley felt an impact in his right thigh that he described as feeling like he had been kicked by a mule. But he continued the performance. He completed his fall and rolled out of the audience's view. When he stood up, he realized his pants were soaked in blood. Something had traveled from the shotgun and entered his thigh, approximately 1.5 inches. The wound left a hole about the size of his little finger. Coworkers moved Bradley away from the crowd, and they used a shirt as a tourniquet. Bradley pressed brown paper towels against the wound while employees attempted to arrange medical care. Bradley said properly trained first aid staff could not be fined. Park owner Alaska Presley insisted that a trained person was on site but had not reached Bradley before he was transported down the mountain. A worker drove Bradley down in Presley's vehicle, meeting an ambulance at the bottom. At the hospital, doctors removed or flushed small particles from the wound. Police initially believed Bradley may have been struck by wadding from the blank carriage. Bradley disagreed. He said no, he'd been hit by wadding before. It didn't do anything. This was something else. Doctors told him the projectile had missed his femoral artery by a fraction. Had it struck the artery, Bradley could have bled to death. The North Carolina Department of Labor investigated. Officials found that the performers were using real .45 caliber revolvers and real shotguns loaded with blanks rather than firearms designed to fire blanks only. The department fined Ghost Town $2,000 for failing to provide safer weapons. Bradley later claimed that the object was a solid slug that remained in his leg. He also said he believed the shooting might have been intentional and asked police to investigate further. No intentional shooting was ever proven, but the accident ended Bradley's long relationship with the park. Management said Bradley quit. Bradley said he was fired. Other veteran gunfighters left after disputes with management. The man who had spent most of his life pretending to be shot at Ghost Town had finally been shot for real. It's tempting to call Ghost Town cursed. Even Alaska Presley once said a friend believed there were demons on the mountain because the park had experienced so much bad luck. But a curse, it's almost too simple. Ghost Town did not collapse because of one mysterious force. It collapsed through a cascade of problems. Each failure made the next one harder to survive. Ghost Town's downfall wasn't one dramatic moment. It's decades of small cracks spreading. Eventually, there is nothing left to hold the park together. But people are still not ready to let it die. Over the next several years, new owners, investors, developers, and dreamers would repeatedly announce that Ghost Town was coming back. Every reassurance began with excitement, and almost everyone ended the same way. Locked gates, unpaid bills, broken promises, and an empty town waiting above Maggie Valley. And that brings us to the strangest chapter in the history of Ghost Town, the part where the fake Ghost Town becomes a real one. Today, the park is sitting above Maggie Valley, approximately 4,600 feet up Buck Mountain. It has not been demolished, it's not been swallowed completely by the forest, and despite the number of revival announcements made over the years, it's not been reopened to the public. It's simply waiting. Behind locked gates, much of the western town reportedly remains. Main Street is still there, lined with its collection of false front buildings. The saloons, the jail, the church, the schoolhouse, the bank, and the old storefronts. Not everything is preserved, of course. Time has been working on the place for years. Paint has peeled, wood has warped, vegetation is pushed into areas that were once swept clean for tourists. Weather moves freely through buildings that were never intended to stand empty for this long. And above it all, the cliffhanger roller coaster can still be seen on the mountainside. Its steel track rising against the sky like the skeleton of some enormous red and yellow animal. The remnants of the chairlift, incline railway, and other park equipment have also remained on the property, although their exact condition has changed over the years. Some attractions disappeared, some were damaged, others were simply left where they stood when the crowd stopped coming. There is something uniquely unsettling about an abandoned amusement park. I have talked about this before. An abandoned factory is silent because it was built for work. An abandoned house is silent because the family left it. But an abandoned amusement park was built specifically for noise. Music, screaming bells, gunshots, machinery, children begging for one more ride. Performers delivering the same lines they had delivered 1,000 times before. When all of that disappears, the silence feels unnatural. At Ghost Town, that silence is amplified by the setting. The park is isolated above the valley, where clouds and fog can move across the mountain and temporarily erase entire sections of the property. One moment, Main Street is visible. The next, the town is gone. Will it ever reopen? There is still occasional talk of bringing Ghost Town back, but the latest proposal does not sound like a complete resurrection of the old amusement park. In 2025, owner Jim McClure said that a potential buyer from Florida had expressed interest in the property. According to McClure, the prospective buyer operated an entertainment venue and was interested in preserving the western town while developing something centered around family entertainment, country music, rodeos, festivals, and a convention-style events. That sounds great. That means Ghost Town has a future. But it's not the future people remember. The property was described as containing approximately 285 acres and reportedly was appraised as $6.4 million. McClure said that she wanted the mountain to remain connected to tourism and entertainment rather than being carved into residential lots. However, as of the latest update, I couldn't verify no completed sale or a reopening date or a firm redevelopment plan that had been publicly announced. For now, Ghost Town remains closed. It is private property. There are no trespassing signs and they are enforced. And people living near the entrance have reported regularly catching would-be explorers attempting to enter. The abandoned park, the buildings, the equipment, they're all really dangerous. So there is no public tours there. And unfortunately for the paranormal investigators among us, there is no legal midnight ghost tours either. But is the ghost town actually haunted? This is where the story becomes slightly complicated. Search online long enough and you will find people describing unexplained noises, distant voices, footsteps, movement inside buildings, and the feeling of being watched from the empty storefronts. Some claim to have heard what sounds like gunfire from the abandoned western town. Others describe shadows or figures appearing briefly in windows. And because the park contains empty buildings, saloons, a jail, a church, and the fog, every photograph already looks like the opening scene of a horror movie. But here is the important part. Ghost Town in the Sky does not appear to have a long, well-documented haunting tradition. There's no famous named ghost associated with the park. There is no reliably documented death on one of its major rides that can be connected to a spirit. And I honestly could not confirm any of the hauntings. Most of the ghost stories seem to be modern, passed around through the local social media, paranormal videos, and urban explorer circles after the park became abandoned. That does not necessarily mean everyone's telling the story is lying. An empty mountaintop park is filled with things capable of producing extremely convincing noises. Wind moves through damaged buildings, Old doors swing, metal expands and contracts, animals make noise. Sounds can travel strangely across the mountain. And if a saloon door bangs shut at 46,000 feet, the wind should probably remain its number one suspect. But still, imagine standing on that empty street after dark. The buildings around you were designed as scenery. The gunfighters were actors. The bodies in the street were supposed to rise again after every performance. But now the show is over. There is nobody waiting behind the saloon doors, nobody preparing for the next gunfight, nobody ringing a bell to announce another performance. Then somewhere beyond the fog, you hear a gunshot. Ghost Town may not have proven a haunting. It may not need one. The park itself has become the ghost. Until someone opens those gates again, Ghost Town in the Sky remains exactly what its name promised. A town above the clouds, full of stories, empty of people, and waiting. Thank you so much for listening and joining me on another journey into the strange, dark history hiding behind the places we love. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow or subscribe to Death Kiss Traveler so you never miss our next trip into an abandoned amusement park, forgotten attraction, or deadly ride, and the ghost stories that refuse to stay buried. And if you have a minute, please leave this podcast a rating and a review. It helps new listeners discover the show and lets me know you want more stories just like this one. Until next time, keep traveling, keep looking beyond the bright lights, and remember, sometimes the places that appear abandoned aren't entirely empty. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler, my spooky friends. I will see you next week for my birthday episode. It is my birthday, and I am celebrating in a big way. I'll see you next Friday. This podcast is researched and written by me, Marissa. Produced by Sunkissed Traveler, the travel agency that takes the stress out of planning a vacation wherever you want to go. How about a Caribbean cruise or a trip to North Carolina? Wherever you want to travel, Sunkissed Traveler can help. See show notes for details. And now, my friends, I have another podcast that I think you're going to love.
Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you.